The audience, looking at you two. You guys need to go to your class now. It is 6:35, so I'm going to ask that everyone to please take your seats, and I'm going to get started with the class. I'm going to open us up with a word of prayer, and we'll get going. So if you could join me in prayer. Almighty Lord, we thank you for allowing us to gather here tonight to discuss you. I pray that you would guide my words, that you would help me to speak accurately and correctly, and that the class would be beneficial for us all. Please grow our faith and trust and love in you. All this I pray in your holy name. Amen. All right, so tonight is our last class in going through the book, Why Should I Believe Christianity? Now, it was only after we scheduled this for 8 weeks that I realized the 8th chapter is just kind of a general conclusion. And I'm like, oh, so I guess I am going to attempt to give an overview of the entire book tonight, reinforcing the things that we've talked about. Notice that I said attempt. I don't know if I'm going to succeed in it. It's a high wire act, so you all can enjoy the fall should that happen. Hopefully it will not. Okay. So, we have been talking a lot about worldview in this series. Who wants to give me an attempted definition at worldview? It's okay if it's not perfect. Just what do you think of when we talk about worldview?
Like the lens by which we view the world.
That's great. Lens by which we view the world. I was going to put it as a framework for interpreting reality. Framework for interpreting reality. All right. So, we all need a way to interpret the data of the world, to make sense of it. No one is neutral. Right? And as Reformed people, we kind of instinctively understand that when it comes to things like soteriology, right? We understand that we're born in sin, we're born enemies to God. This is really an extension of that basic point into other areas of life, right? There is no neutrality. I was listening to a RTS professor in some lectures this week, Robert Caro, who I highly recommend you look up his lectures on the RTS app. He has some great stuff. But as he puts it, he says, not all biases are bad. Bad biases are bad, right? Everybody has biases. We want to have the bias that aligns with God's view and understanding of the world, since that's the true view and understanding of the world. Okay, everybody has a worldview. I don't know who said this, but somebody said it was worldviews are like belly buttons. Everybody has them, even if we don't talk about them. Unless you're my 2-year-old who will happily show you his belly button anytime and any place. What do you guys think is the majority worldview of the society we live in? Actually, let me rephrase that. What do you think the percentage of the society we live in has a Christian worldview? 30%, no lower. I heard 15%. It's lower than 15. I heard 1. It's higher than 1. Lower. 3. It's between 4 and 6%. According to Arizona Christian University's study that they did with the Barna group, or Barna somebody. I don't know if it's a group or just the guy. But they have been doing this for several years, and they have apparently a comprehensive survey that's geared to understanding whether somebody has a Christian worldview or not. They wanted me to pay to look at that survey, which I was not willing to do. So I don't know how accurate that survey is, but it's probably accurate. That's probably what I would guess. Maybe around 5% of the people you meet have a biblical worldview. Okay, so what do you think the majority worldview is? Agnostic? Keep going.
It's like a form of humanism, so like whatever makes you happy.
Okay. I think that's getting a little bit closer to what I was thinking. I don't have data on this, so it's actually kind of more my opinion, but here's what I think. I think it's a syncretic view. Let's see if I can spell syncretic. Probably not. Syncretic. So it means they're grabbing from a bunch of different worldviews, right? I don't think most people are trying to operate from a strictly materialist or naturalist worldview, right? So David mentioned, yes, do you have a question? Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Yeah, so David brought up moral therapeutic deism a while back. Could you tell us what that is? Do you remember what it stands for? That's right. That's right. That's excellent. So yeah, so the idea is, well, yeah, maybe there's a God out there. It's not the God of the Bible. Maybe he kind of wound stuff up, sent it off, and everything's just kind of running and he stays out of it. But when he does get involved, it's primarily to make me happy. Right? That's moral therapeutic deism, moralistic therapeutic deism. Yeah, I think that's kind of where a lot of people are operating from, right? Most people are not going to be strict materialists. Most people that you meet, right? I do think that when you start getting into certain sections of people, maybe certain academics, scientists, maybe more cultural elites, then you will find at least acclaimed materialism. Whether or not they are consistent with that is another matter entirely. So, sorry about that. So, most people are functional atheists, right? They think the world is just kind of this machine that runs on itself. God isn't really involved in the everyday matters. Now, as I said, that syncretic view, because it's pulling stuff from every which way, is inconsistent. However, all non-Christian worldviews are inconsistent. Now, maybe the syncretic view is a little bit more obvious, right? But the reality is all non-Christian worldviews are denying the triune God that makes all the things they want to use possible, right? And so they have to have that inconsistency in there, right? It falls apart under its own weight. They have nothing to actually establish the things that they want to use in their everyday life. Now, when we're engaging unbelievers, they're going to want us very often to take a neutral stance. What do you think I mean by that? Any guesses? Any thoughts? Oh, could you speak up a little bit, Deb? Yeah, maybe like I'm okay. Yeah, potentially that could be one way that neutrality comes in. Any other ideas?
Everything's right.
Potentially they could be arguing everything's right. Yep. I was thinking the kind of neutrality of, they don't want us to start off with the assumption and belief that Scripture is true, right? They want us to start off with a neutral point of view and say, we need to start off neutrally and then argue for this or that, right? There's a couple problems with that understanding. So we're going to say, no, we're not neutral, right? We know the Lord, we trust in him, and we're not going to pretend that we don't. That stance is not, kind of a neutrality stance is not honoring to the Lord, right? It's essentially saying, if we're taking a neutral stance, what we're ultimately coming down to is a probability statement, right? We're going to start off, we're saying there's a probability that God is true and a probability he's not true. And maybe our arguments can make it a really high probability that he's true. Okay, the problem with that is that you're also saying there's probability that it's not true, right? Which we reject. So the other issue, and that's the biggest issue, right? So it's dishonoring. But the other issue is that it's granting that the world is potentially intelligible without God. And that's the whole point we're saying. No, it's not. Right? So if you go to a neutral stance and say, yeah, the world's probably intelligible without God, okay, you've already moved away from what the truth is and what the Christian position is. All right, so let's try to work this out a little bit. Here's a sentence. So we've been using materialism as kind of our foil throughout this whole series because it's kind of an easy one to use as a foil. All right, so here is, let me see what my sentence is here. We're going to assume a materialist is saying this sentence, and then we're going to break this sentence apart and say, why is materialism not able to support this sentence? Okay, so the materialist says, I think that scientists should be honest and careful in their work because they have a responsibility to uncover knowledge. Uncover knowledge, and I misspelled knowledge. Okay, all right. So that's a pretty benign statement. All right, let's go through it and pick it apart. So again, materialist is saying this. Why can't a materialist say this? Let's just go through the sentence starting from the beginning and tell me what's wrong with it. Yeah?
They're presupposing their own existence.
Okay, yes, good. Fair enough, yes. So they're presupposing their own existence. Yeah, fair enough. I was thinking, I think. Okay, so let's start off with thinking. I have to do some erasing here. All right, so I think. What's the problem with materialism and thinking, or naturalism and thinking? Any issues? Here's one. Intentionality. Does anybody know what intentionality is when it comes to the idea of the mind? Has anybody heard that phrase before? No one? Okay. So when referring to the intentionality, when it's referring to thoughts or the mind, it just simply means aboutness, right? Right now, I am thinking about the Eiffel Tower. Okay, that thought, the intentionality of that thought is the Eiffel Tower. All right, this is a huge problem for materialism. okay? If you were to look inside my head right now, would you see a tiny picture of the Eiffel Tower? No, you would not, right? So where is it? Where is it? All from the materialist point of view, it's definitely not it's just electrical signals and chemical reactions happening in my brain, right? But those electrical signals aren't in the shape of an Eiffel Tower. It's not like a TV where the light is arranged in a pattern to look like something. Where is it coming from? It's actually a big problem. They don't have an answer for that, right? We've talked about, you might remember a couple weeks ago, we talked about an atheist philosopher named Alex Rosenberg. And his answer is, it's an illusion. You're actually not thinking about the Eiffel Tower right now. You are mistaken. You don't actually think that, right? That's a logical conclusion to his position, right? It's a dumb conclusion, right? But it is a logical conclusion. But he will bite the bullet and say, you do not actually think, at least the way you think, right? This is just kind of this ephemeral illusion. You got electrical signals in the brain, going up to this kind of illusion of thought. Okay? Now, I'm not sure why that, even in that format, why that would even really help with the problem of intentionality, because presumably the illusion also has some intentionality to it. But that's what they're going to go with, all right? Now, there's another aspect of it. Can materialism support reason? Why not?
Because it's just brains with chemical reactions. You have two sodas, and you say one fizzes rationally better than the other, then that doesn't make any logical sense. There's no epistemological foundation for that.
Right. That's great. That's a great way to phrase it. Yeah. Reason is normative, right? Normative meaning it's what you should do, right? It's how you should think. There's no should in materialism. There simply is. It's what physics does, right? Problem is, that's not what reason is. Reason is not physics. In your mind, as you were saying, it's just electrical signals, right? Here's the problem. When those electrical signals go up to a thought, in materialism, is this a two-way street? No, it's a one-way street. This is all illusion, right? The only thing that can potentially be happening is these electrical signals going up. So you might think that you're reasoning X, therefore Y, therefore whatever, but you're not. It's all happening down here with the electrical signals. All right? Has anybody read H.G. Wells? Do you know who H.G. Wells is? Somebody want to tell me who H.G. Wells is? Yeah, Jean-Paul. Yep, he was a science fiction writer. So he read The Time Machine. You probably had to read that in high school or college, maybe. Does anybody know what his last book was? Or his last long essay, depending on how you want to look at it. No one? It's called Mind at the End of Its Tether. So through the middle part of H.G. Wells' career, he was a utopianist, I guess. I don't know if that's a word. He promoted the idea of utopia, right? That science was going to bring us into utopia. By the end of his life in 1945, he had seen 2 world wars. He had seen drastic changes to society and technology. And he was no longer optimistic. Now, in fairness, in full disclosure, I have not read all of Mind at the End of Its Tether because I found it dumb and boring. But I read enough to get the gist of it, and here's the gist. Wells is saying that reason is simply the product of evolutionary forces. It's how man developed to survive. And now the world we have created and perhaps discovered has moved beyond reason. It doesn't work anymore. We've hit the wall. And Wells's point was that either humanity as a whole was going to die off and become extinct, and that some brand new organism was going to evolve with a new sense of reason that's very different from ours, or some group of humanity was individually going to evolve beyond humanity. The point here is that for Wells, and I think for consistent materialists, they ultimately have to say, reason isn't what you really think it is, right? Nobody uses the term reason as this, it was just a temporary tool that doesn't really give us the full sense of the world or can't actually be, like, no, it actually gives you true things. It's a way of understanding things in reality, right? You have to ultimately discard that in materialism. And Wells goes to the end of the line there. And he's saying, you know what? Reason, we have to get rid of it. It's not going to bring us any further. Now, what's the problem with that argument, other than what I just said? What's he using to critique reason? Yeah, he's using reason to critique reason, right? His position is self-undermining. So why should we care what he says at that point? Well, he doesn't really have an answer for that. All right, so thinking is a problem when it comes to materialism. I think that scientists, all right, can science exist in a materialist worldview? Or can materialism support science? Why not? No, why not?
Because it needs the foundation of consistency in nature, that logic works, and that truth exists, which all must presuppose God.
Yep, yeah, that's right. So science wants to deal with, as they say, the laws of nature, the laws of physics. What are those laws, right? They're not material things, you guys are materialists. So if there's no law out there, why do things remain uniform, right? Why do they happen over the same way again and again and again? There's nothing to ground that concept. Now, when you ask a materialist, do you remember what we talked about this a little bit with Stephen Hawking, kind of with his understanding of like meta laws and stuff. What's Stephen Hawking answer and what's the materialist answer for when you ask them, why does the world behave uniformly? It just does. It just does. And I don't think that's a straw man. That's actually the answer when you dig it down. It just does, right? Now, in other situations, I don't think a materialist is going to accept that answer, right? If I tell the materialist you're wrong, and he says why, and I say, you just are. It's just the way it is. You're just wrong. Probably not going to be very convincing to him. Yeah. But then he takes a different standard when he wants to take his worldview on the road. Okay, what's the motivation for science in a materialist worldview? Can you have one? I don't think so. There is a apologist who ran an internet site that I liked called, I'm probably going to mispronounce it, Triablog, I don't know. Triablog. His name was Steve Hayes. He died about 6 years ago, but the blog is still up and running with other contributors. It's a good blog. I don't agree with everything on it, but if you're looking for a general apologetics blog, there's some interesting stuff on there. I'd point you to it. He liked to use the imagery of materialism and atheism being like a death camp. And he would, so the idea kind of here is that, atheists wanting to do science is like somebody in the death camp coming up to you and saying, you know what, we're all going to be killed tomorrow. But we really have to find out what the soil composition in this camp is. Like, we need to know exactly how big the camp is and what materials it's made out of. It's super important for us to understand the structural integrity of the camp walls. No, you're in a death camp, right? There is no meaning according to materialism. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but why should we care about anything if, in the end, there's no purpose, there's no meaning, and it's all going to be destroyed in the end? All right, next. Yeah, question? So you could make an argument that the purpose is survival. I would say, so what? I mean, you survive, what, an extra 5 minutes, an extra day, an extra couple years? It all ends up in the same place, right? Long run, it really doesn't make a much difference. So that's probably where I would go with it. Yeah. Next should be honest and careful. All right. Can morality exist in a materialist atheist worldview? Yeah, Nick. No, it cannot. Why not? Again, the idea of normativity, right? Morality implies that there is a standard, that there is a lawgiver. And again, some atheists are honest with that, right? Where they will say, yeah, you're right, and there is no such thing as morality. Now, again, do they consistently live like that? No. Somebody was telling me, sorry, whoever you were, that they were engaging with, Abraham, I think it was Abraham. They were engaging with atheists online. And the atheist online said, yes, I don't believe murder's wrong. I don't believe rape's wrong because, yep, there's no such thing as morality, right? I have never heard somebody in real life actually make that argument. Nobody lives like that, right? Even if they say it theoretically, once somebody steals from them or tries to kill them, suddenly the situation's very different. And now morality comes out very strongly, right? Again, there's an inconsistent worldview happening here. All right. Let's see. In their work, because they have a responsibility to uncover knowledge. Okay. Does anybody know what the general definition of knowledge is? So this is going to be, this is slightly outdated, and I think some epistemologists will expand it out a little bit. I think for the purposes of our conversation, this works well enough. Justified true belief. Justified true belief. Again, right off the bat, normativity comes into play. Right? Justified is saying there's a criteria here you have to meet for something to be knowledge, and not just a lucky guess. What is that? Where are you getting it from? Are you just making it up? Is your understanding of that criteria as good as my understanding, as good as this person's understanding? Now, earlier you had mentioned, what about survival? Well, they kind of bring, some materialists will kind of try to bring that into knowledge, right? They'll say, well, knowledge is, we're not really looking at normativity, but reliability, right? What gets the job done? Okay, well, one, that's a subtle redefinition of knowledge. And you might see a theme here, right? People are trying to subtly redefine things into what they are not. But in addition to that, how do you know whether something is reliable or not, whether it's successful or not? Oh, again, you're using knowledge to establish that. Again, it becomes a viciously circular argument. Okay, questions about that? Let me pause there. No? Okay, so this whole statement is also using logic. Oop. This one I wrote down beforehand. Okay, so here are generally accepted laws of logic. There are logicians that will reject some of these, or maybe even all of them, and go with different types of logic, but for the purposes of our conversation, I think this is pretty good. You have the law of identity, that every true statement is true and every false statement is false. You have the law of non-contradiction, that no statement can be both true and false, and the law of excluded middle, that every statement must be either true or false. So this argument is explicated in detail by the author of the book we're going through in an essay, and it is called The Lord of Non-Contradiction. So James Anderson, Lord of Non-Contradiction. If you're interested in this, I strongly recommend it. And Anderson's argument goes like this. What are the laws of logic? Well, they are necessary meaning they couldn't be something else, right? You can't imagine, some of these things not holding. They're necessary truths about other truths. Okay? meaning that they are, another way to phrase it, they're necessary propositions, right? Propositions are not physical, right? If I erase the law of identity from this board, doesn't mean that the law of identity goes away, right? They have intentionality, which we talked about before with mind, or aboutness. Now that intentionality is a mark of the mental, right? So where Anderson goes with it is he says, they are necessary thoughts, right? They cannot exist without God providing them. Does that make sense? The larger argument is much more detailed. So if you want to go into that paper, again, it's a good place to look. Now, let's go beyond these are all mostly intellectual arguments, right? Let's go beyond that a little bit to other aspects of life. Can naturalism explain love? What do you think? Well, I'd say, again, not without redefining it. It just, again, it reduces it to chemical reactions in your brain. There's no real difference within materialism between love and hate. It's just your illusory experience based on a particular reaction. Okay? Could have been different, the reaction was different. There's no meaning behind it, there's nothing solid behind it. It's just atoms moving around. And yet again, materialists don't treat it that way, right? They still care for their kids. They still bristle at the suggestion that you don't really love your kid, right? It's just electrical impulses in your brain. You might as well equally all hate your kid. No, they don't act like that. They don't live like that. They know in their bones that that is not correct. Only Christianity can explain love. I'm going to read 1 John 4, 7 through 8. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God. Whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. Chemical reactions are not the source of love. The Trinity is the source of love, because the persons of the Trinity love one another from all eternity. And that's reflected analogically in creation. What about telos? Does anybody know what telos means? Anybody know what telos means? Purpose, yeah, end goal. Yep, purpose, end goal. Yep. Okay, let's read Ecclesiastes 3:11. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. Does anybody know the word? I'm going to see if I can spell it. It's a German word because the Germans have words for everything. Sehnsucht. I'm probably mispronouncing it. Sehnsucht. Anybody know that word? Anybody seen it? No? Okay. Whenever I talk about C.S. Lewis, I think I have to give like a little qualifier, because we're so overly reliant on C.S. Lewis and he has a lot of terrible ideas and terrible theology. But when he gets it right, he's really, really good, right? And here's one place that he gets it right. So C.S. Lewis refers to it as joy in his writings. Is anybody familiar with that now that I bring that part up? Anybody read that? No? Okay, maybe a couple heads nodding. Right. Sehnsucht, or as Lewis calls it, joy, is a deep longing for something you haven't experienced. Right? And Lewis says, it hits us so deeply, we're actually kind of embarrassed to talk about it. Right? You get a little shy talking about it. But it is that sensation you have when you listen to a piece of music, or read a particular book, or see a particular sunset, and there's a longing there for something you can't quite explain. Lewis, I think, describes it as you almost want to get into beauty somehow. I think what's going on there is a yearning for the telos. It's a yearning for the eternity that God has put in man's heart. Lewis also talks about it as nostalgia. I don't talk about nostalgia a lot, but I am kind of a nostalgic person, and I get very nostalgic when I think about a period of time like the late 90s to early 2000s. Now, if I were to go back to that time in my life was definitely not perfect at that time. It's not a golden age, right? There's plenty of bad stuff going on. And yet, nostalgia, I think, is a category of this. Alvin Plantinga, the Christian philosopher, also kind of makes mention towards something like this, where the good things in the past are elevated and intensified, right? Not because it's a true memory, but because it's a signpost. It's a signpost not to the past, but to the future. Now, what does materialism have to say about this? Well, I looked up one atheist's understanding of nostalgia, kind of related to Sehnsucht, and his response was, it's just your nerve endings in your brain getting overloaded with sensations. It's nothing. It's nothing. Right? That's not an explanation. That's an excuse. Right? And I think people know that intuitively. If the worldview is telling you the thing you feel so deeply is just nothing, it's a mistake, it's a chemical reaction that you can easily ignore, you should know something's off. You should know something's wrong. This is a sidebar that I put in last minute, so we'll see how this goes. I was listening to a lecture, I mentioned it today, I was listening to a lecture by Robert Caro. And it got me thinking about how much materialism we unintentionally bring in to our lives and the way we view the world. So Caro was talking about kind of the pre-modern view, or the pre-moderns' view of the world, and specifically he was talking about architecture, I think. And he was saying how pre-moderns would look at things and say, beauty is primary, and then that's what comes after beauty is function. All right? Well, once we get into the modern framework, it's function first, and then, maybe beauty if you want it, whatever, doesn't matter. That's why, and he goes on and talks about, that's why you see, really ugly architecture. Like in the 50s and 60s and 70s, a lot of schools are just these concrete boxes. There's no real attempt to make them look at, because it's all function. That's the thing that's important, function. Right? When you look out at the mountains, when I look out at the mountains, I have to fight against the idea that this is a bunch of rock, right? That it is, well, I'll give an example. So I was asking, the kids aren't in here, so I was asking them, why do you think God created mountains? And their response was, I don't know, so animals have places to live? It's a functional response, right? Even at their age, that's kind of the viewpoint we start adapting ourselves to, because that's what so many people around us think. How does Scripture look at it? Well, Nick Batzig has an interesting essay called Mountaintop Theology. And he points out how in Scripture, mountains are illustrations to men to better understand God's attributes, right? They are archetypal creations, meaning they are made to declare the glory of God, to declare his attributes. The functions of the mountains are secondary, right? It's not to say the function doesn't exist, right? And it's not important in its own way, but it's not the primary element. Okay, so that's my sidebar. End of sidebar. Okay. Let's talk about stories. Anderson talks in the book about how worldviews are designed to tell stories, right? Have you ever considered why we're drawn to the idea of stories? Right? It's because we're made in the image of God. The Bible tells one grand story that explains the world. It explains who we are, why the world's broken. It explains how God took on flesh to fix it, defeat evil, and adopt his enemies as his children. There could not be a more beautiful story than that, right? Than the Word made flesh. When you really stop and think about it, that is astounding. And we're so familiar with it, I think we can sometimes miss that. No other worldviews come close in terms of their storytelling, right? They're all either the things like cheap ripoffs, like Islam or Mormonism. Materialism is just a terrible story, right? It says, at base, there's no hope. There's no meaning. There's no nothing. There's no final goal for anything. Does anybody know how materialists think, where they think the universe is going? What's that? It gets cold. Yes. Heat death of the universe is one popular idea. Entropy has run its course. It's all just kind of one same temperature blob, and nothing's happening, no work is occurring. That's one thought. The other big thought is called the Big Rip, where the universe just expands out and nothing stops it, and even atoms themselves are shredded apart. Either way, no hope, no meaning. Now, does anybody really believe it in their heart of hearts? I think the answer is no. I think materialists know deep down that that is not true. I'm going to read from Romans 1, 18 through 23. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, because they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creepy things. Remember that hearts are not changed through intellectual exercises and arguments. Now, God can use those. He uses means to change people's hearts, but by themselves, they do not have the power to save. It's something only the Lord can do. And that is good news for us, right? When you go and tell somebody about Christ and point them to the beauty of the Lord, point them to how he has defeated death, was raised on the third day, and is reigning now, it is not dependent on you to be able to answer every question, right? It's not dependent on you to have just a fantastic delivery, right? You can just tell them the gospel, right? And pray for them. And the Lord will save those who are his. So point them to Christ. That is enough. All right. So final thoughts. Final thoughts here are going to be resources. Additional resources you guys can go to. Next steps if you want to learn more about this line of thought. Okay, one is why I believe in God. It's an essay. It's on, you can get it as a PDF online for free by Cornelius Van Til. That's a great basic way to start learning about presuppositional apologetics, like what we've been doing here. When you want to go past that, look at presuppositional apologetics. Ugh. Presuppositional apologetics, stated and defended, by Greg Bahnsen. Bahnsen was an OPC minister. I certainly don't agree with all his positions. He did lean very heavy into theonomy, which I would disagree with, but in terms of his apologetic work, it's very useful. Presuppositional apologetics, stated and defended. Next, I'd recommend Defense of the Faith by Van Til. Van Til is initially, so he was a native Dutch speaker. And so he was a professor at Westminster. The language can be dense. It can be hard to understand. The modern editions, which I don't even think you could find a non-modern edition out there right now, but the modern editions have really helpful footnotes, so don't be intimidated. Pick it up, you can read it, you can work through it, and it's going to be very helpful. There is an audio debate between the guy who wrote this book, Greg Bahnsen, Bahnsen versus Stein. It's a very, I'm probably mispronouncing, it's probably, no wait. Okay, I think that's right. It's a very entertaining debate. I would recommend you check that out, Bahnsen versus Stein. Anderson, I already mentioned, The Lord of Non-Contradiction. I think I wrote it down someplace else, so I won't write it down again. James Anderson, who wrote the book, also has a website with other resources that are very helpful. James Anderson. He is an RTS professor, and he has, his classes are free online if you want to look at the RTS app. And then finally, I would recommend works by Vern Poythress. If you type in Vern Poythress, you'll find his website. He is a Westminster Seminary professor. He might be retired now. And he puts all his books online for free after a kind of a grace period to sell them as paper books. Very useful materials. I would absolutely check out Vern Poythress. All right, so that is it for the class. That's it for this series. I hope you guys have found it helpful and interesting. Do you have any questions for me? All right, yes?
Kind of halfway silly, did you come across anything about how to explain deja vu?
No. Sorry. All right, well, I'm going to be here for, oh, yeah, Nick.
Is there a recommended epistemological system like Scottish common sense realism or neo-orthodoxy? I know not neo-orthodoxy, but there's like lines of epistemology that you recommend studying?
Well, so I would say I think Scottish common sense realism is kind of a default for a lot of people. I don't think that's the way to go. I think that runs into major issues with kind of a presuppositional approach. So we can talk about that maybe a little bit offline, but yeah, I wouldn't recommend Scottish common sense realism or American common sense realism. I think that is not the best way to go. Yeah, yeah. All right, well, I will be here if you guys have any questions. Thank you for coming tonight, and again, hope it was helpful to you.